Hey folks, this is Tully and welcome to Game Dev Balance Pass tutorial work. I don't know. Today we're going to be continuing on with what we've been doing the last few days, which is kind of setting up a bit of the tutorial experience. Namely, we're going to be looking at designing the skill trees and the balance pass, probably in the opposite order, but we'll see. I think we need to start by figuring out how much damage we should be doing to like the first enemy we ever encounter, and a little bit of that flow. Off camera this morning, I did take a look at setting up the tutorial, last little bit of tutorial UI and cutscenes. It's not done, but I've put us in I think a good spot to be able to test and see if that can be functional. So we're gonna kind of just continue with getting the initial experience up and running. Once again, I'll call it while this loads. We're going to be doing 2 streams today. This one will be 2 hours, and then we'll do another one after an hour lunch break. I'm kind of trying to differentiate these into different tasks, but in a lot of ways, these next few streams are really just about getting the tutorial experience up and running. And once that's out of the way, then we can start working on like designing the rest of the game experience. But I like designing from like the start onwards. So here we're getting the initial cutscene. There's like some polish I'd like to do around some of this stuff, but overall I'm pretty happy with the way that this has kind of come together. I still like to have a different exit here. And then we come down into our map tutorial. So in the last stream yesterday evening, we had set up some new map areas, which have way less props and are much more simple. But we're going to leave it that way as we kind of figure out the last little bit of the tutorial. Even kind of playing around with it yesterday, I realized I may have made some of these maps a little too big or a little too windy, and I might want to readjust them. So we're going to figure out what feels right first, and then we will spend a bunch of time getting a lot of the props set up once we're positive that this is the layout we want. Okay, so that all being said, where do we start today? I think I want to test this idea of doing another type of dialogue moment with our main character hero when they encounter a few things for the first time. And I think we just start with getting a basic version of this set up. So let's grab, say, ooh, what does boot intro look like? This one looks pretty straightforward, as does this one. Let's start with the lightning one. So let's grab the lightning one. Oh, actually the goddess one's a better reference, I think, because we want to have dialogue. So we're going to come into here. We're going to make a new one of these, and we're going to call this exit room tutorial. And then inside of this one, it's not going to have anything to do with the revealing. It's not going to have the playing of the effects. In fact, I don't think it has any of this. I believe what we really just want is to be able to spawn a separate sequence. So right now this is spawning the custom addressable ID, or spawning the addressable ID for custom room transitions goddess boot intro, which is going to be under sequences, I believe. Let's close this. We don't need prefabs open. Yeah, in here. So this becomes Forest TO1, and we're going to make another one of these. We're going to call this exit room tutorial. And then we're going to make a exit room tutorial dialogue. And I just want to make sure this is functional. So this is really kind of finishing up a little bit of the work that I was doing off camera this morning, making sure it's working. Before we move on to some of the balance pass. Okay, so I think this goes in here now. And then we just need a little bit of dialogue here. I'm really bad at like programmer typing and just like capitalizing things with emphasis. Just so many variable creations over the years that my brain just doesn't type properly. It looks like the path continues deeper into the woods. Don't love it, but I think that'll work for now. Okay, that'll be a closed self, medium-sized, top center. Seems okay. We won't worry about any of the emotion stuff right now. We can take another stab at that later. And then we're going to have to give this a addressable ID. We'll use this as a reference. TO1. And then rename this to exit room tutorial. That gets put into here as the ID we care about. And then we will minus this and minus this. We aren't setting any UI flags on this one. Exit room tutorial is complete. Okay. So this object should now play this sequence, which is basically just hero speaking for a moment. The only thing is this won't be a spawn only ability effect. This will need to be a flag required ability effect. We're going to take a look at this real quick. This is some of what I've set up this morning. We're just going to make a change. I wanted to do this part on camera. So we have been doing a lot of the flag setup stuff in such a way that it is essentially just a string ID with the expectation that it is in a specific state. And we assume that state in script. But I think what I'd like to do moving forward is I'd like to make it so instead we have a class object. So let's take a look at where flag status is defined. That's part of the flag state and the flag helper. What about, where are the actual iFlag defined? That is defined here inside of iFlag. I don't think that's the right spot either. I think I'm going to add another class in here for now as we figure this out. We might separate this into a separate file later, but we're going to call this flag required flag. Sure, required flag. And this will take a string ID, flag ID, and it will also take a required status. We don't need the word flag in here. And this will be a flag status type variable. Then we need to make sure that this is serializable. And this will be what we use inside of our locations where we're trying to use flags. Required flags. And what we'll do here is instead of just saying whether or not it's in the right state, we're going to loop through all of these. So we're going to loop through all the this should be required flags. In the list. And we're going to check if any of them, using the backend here, we'll check the required flags flag ID, and we will validate whether or not it is in the current state that we expect. Required state. And if it is not in that required state, we will return that you cannot target this. False. Otherwise, if we get outside of this for loop, it means everything was true, so we can return true. I'm just going to clean this up, shrink it down a bit. And I think that should work. Now, I am a little afraid that I may be using some of these locations in different spots. Well, I made this one this morning, but I still want to write it. There's a couple other spots where I want to do this, and so I'm going to copy and paste from here in the future. And so I want to make sure that anytime, because this is a new format and we were just using the string before, I want to make sure that if we ever find that the flag ID is set to something, we're going to debug log error, and we found flag ID set in, and then game object dot name. And now when I go to do this in other spots, I'm hopeful that I'll be able to tell if this ID is being set anywhere and I've missed any spots as we refactor. Okay. Sure. I'm just going to comment it out for this class. And then I think we should be able to come in here, and then required flags, we're going to put in here the same ID that we were going to use for the set part. So inside of this sequence here, we're going to say that it's requiring that this one be not started. And the sequence that we play from this tutorial will set it to complete, so this won't happen again. That's the idea. Now we need to add that to our list of flags. So we're going to open up the Excel sheet for our flags. We're going to add a new one. We're going to download that off camera. Just going to be quick about this, and then we're going to reparse. Tools, flag parser. Okay, now if we go check the JSON files, there should be a new flag for this. And its default state is not started, which is good. Also, did I just notice... Yeah, this is TO1. I think some of the stuff here was still using the wrong ID, because we remapped it, I think, and updated it, but we did not fix it there. Okay, and did we fix it in the script for that one? That one's handled a little differently. That is handled by the cutscene manager, and it is correct. Okay, so that's fixed. While we're here, I think I will also adjust the addressable names here to match the new room that this is actually in. That's all good. And then we just need to update inside of here that as well. Okay. A little bit of work here this morning, but I just want to see if this is working. So if we now go into the room for TO1, for the tutorial 1 room, and we add a new ability tile. And we're going to give it the addressable ID for this, which it needs one. What was the naming convention we used here? Tile underscore. So this will be the name of the folder above it. So cutscene, exit tutorial, and we'll get rid of the prefab from the end of that. Okay. This shouldn't need an entity ID, and it shouldn't need a spawn direction. It's just adding a special cutscene ability that should play here, and we're going to rename it as such. Exit room tutorial. And we're going to need 2 of these because you could enter into either of these tiles, but it should do the same tutorial one time regardless of which one you step on. Let's give that a test. Okay, and we step forward here. I can't move anywhere. It looks like the path continues deeper into the woods here. I don't love the double here in that sentence. It sounds a bit repetitive. I need to find a better way to reframe it, but that works. It feels like there's a fair amount of setup involved. I have to create a prefab. I have to give that prefab an ID. I need to create a sequence cutscene. I need to create a dialogue asset. It makes sense. I need all of these different data inputs to kind of create all this stuff, but I kind of wish... There's a lot of times with a lot of my creation of like new files that I kind of feel like it might make sense to make like a command that just says make a new one in this folder, and it just like creates this file, gives it the correct addressable names with the same name as what it is based off its folder name, creates a new ability in the correct spot, and then I think I'd always have to come in here and update these values, but I think there's probably some sort of window we could do to make this a little faster. For the demo, I think it's okay. Plus, we're only really going to have a ton of these for the tutorial. Yeah, that's not entirely true. I want to do a lot of these little dialogue moments. Yeah, we probably want some sort of tools to speed this process up. Let's see. Let's make one more. Let's switch up the background music. Do love Strategist to open on, but let's go with... want something a little more upbeat. March forward? Sure, we can go with this one. So I need another set of tutorials. Did that not copy? I thought I hit control. Okay, so we're going to make a new folder. This one will be in Forest TO2. We're going to copy and paste this in here. And this one will be Reveal Room Tutorial. Same name in here. Yeah, I think it's like setting up the addressables, which is a large amount of the extra work in here. It seems to like auto name it based off of its asset name and its directory. I wonder if there's a way I can gain access to that and like change how many folders up it searches. Because if I could change the default naming, that would also save it a lot of time as well. Okay, and then we'll need to make a new cutscene. These should probably also subfoldered based off room, but for now, we'll leave them where they are. The nice thing about the addressable system is their folder structure doesn't matter too much. Reveal room. And then inside of here, this is going to need to be a TO2. This needs to be renamed to Reveal. Did I get that wrong? That should be this entry. Oh, it's got tutorial twice in there somehow? Not sure how I made that mistake. Is that true for the one above too? Or two L's? No. Interesting. So that's set up. Other thing here is this is going to be the same rename here. Like, even these data inputs probably could be automated out. Make a new object, give it a couple of default sequence steps, which match this ID to the asset we're making, match this to the name, because it should be named the same for the flag. This one could be empty, it doesn't need to have anything in it by default. Then up here, reveal room. This is going to need this flag to be not started, and it's going to need to launch this sequence. So that's not too bad. So if we grab this object, in fact, we'll grab the whole cutscenes object, and then go over to TO2. Drop this in here. Drag it under the room object so it'll get parsed correctly. And then bring over these. And these become reveal room tutorials. And this should be reveal room addressable IDs for the abilities we want to play here. Okay, so now if we step forward, we should see the same dialogue because we haven't rewritten it. We did not. Did we fail to find? Should be this ID here. They look identical when I hit paste. And I am pasting. Interesting. You know what I think might be happening sometimes? I think I'm moving the objects and then hitting Control S to save, and then modifying the parameters inside of it. No, that's not it. I was thinking maybe it wasn't actually doing the import, and the manual import would help us, but this should have just worked. When we step here, let's move them over a little bit. Maybe it's like some sort of weird bug with like the first step you take in a room. Let's also check the console, see if there's some sort of error message. No, we have no messages at all. Oh, interesting, actually. So what it is we didn't actually come over to this like design data, and we did not add the new flag in here. And then because we didn't have this new flag in here parsed in, it's not finding it. But I guess it like silently fails? Interesting. So, okay, if we come into here, check flag status, this does a backend check flag status. Ah, we do check if it contains the key. And if it doesn't contain the key, we don't use it. And because of that, if it's just not found, we just silently say, nope, don't worry, it's not in the right state. I think I might want an error check in here. And we'll do that like this. Flags dot try get value instead. And given a key, try to out a I flag. And if it's valid, we will just do this logic on the I flag and return it. Else, well, we don't even need an else statement because we're returning in that if statement. If we don't find it, then I think we should do a debug log error so that I know that something is broken, because I was very confused there. And we can say that this flag ID not found. The problem with this is an integer. We've already casted it to its final form. So we don't actually know what the string value is, which is what we actually care about. And this can return false. So perhaps, rather than always casting the value, we should be giving the string, but there's some situations like here where we do an iExplore system, which we haven't gotten into. It returns the integer value. Yeah, it is what it is. I can always grab the integer and check the JSON and see what that flag ID would be. This is kind of the problem with like casting everything and or hashing all the strings to integers, is it makes debugging more difficult for like a nominal increase in performance. But I've already kind of made the decision a long time ago before I realized the downsides, and to rip everything up and get rid of all the hashing would be difficult. Not impossible, because it all goes through one utility function, which is easy to track down, but still would be annoying to refactor everything right now. Okay, so then I haven't parsed yet, so if we walk through, we should get that debug error. And then we'll do the parse and make sure it's actually working. Yeah, so now we're getting... Ooh, we're getting a couple of IDs that are not found. Oh, and silly me. I just said a dumb. If I said I could just use the ID integer to look up in the JSON what ID it is, but if it's not found, it means that isn't... It's just not... It's just not going to be tracked. Interesting. So we're checking when we populate the quests and the explorers, there are a couple of IDs that I'm missing. Okay, so I could debug to figure out what those are, but they're not a big deal right now. But good to know that there are some underlying bugs. Let's track that in our pureref doc as like a bug. I think because they're to do with quests and the explorers, that has to do with the town system, which we're not working on for the demo anyways. So it is an extremely low priority bug. But I do want to keep track of it regardless. We'll just make it really small. Track down missing flag IDs. Little bit of bug. Little tiny bug. Okay, now if we parse though, let's do... Actually, so that they're not always showing up for the next little while here, I think I'm going to change this to a debug warning. Just so that I can hide them if need be. Because... Well, we have a lot of warnings, though. It might get lost. We should also clean some of these up. Like, repeat entity ID is kind of a big deal, and we should solve those. But I guess these are also warning levels. Some of these that are really should be bugs. Yeah, okay. That is fine. We will make them warnings for the time being. Let's parse in the data, because I would like to get to the actual title of this stream, which is Balance Pass and Skill Trees. And we've already spent half an hour on this. Okay, and so now this is showing up now that we've parsed the flags in. So that was the last missing piece, was we just hadn't set up the flag in the design data. Cool. So, last thing I want to do on that is let's just do a quick pass on the dialogue. I believe Goddess ID is correct here. Is that the NPC Goddess is the name? We're going to have the Goddess speak. Actually, we can't do that. So I think what I want to do is I want to have the Goddess dialogue appear, but like from off camera or something. But I don't remember. We did this for the jailbreak cutscene in Era of Embers, but I think I did it by actually making like an entity marker in the scene that was just like going to be off camera. We don't really have a way of like anchoring a dialogue to like UI, for example. It only anchors to entities in 3D space. Okay. This is another thing we should track. This is more of a feature, but we should figure out a way. Anchor dialogue to UI. Option to anchor dialogue to UI. That's something we should do at some point. For now, we'll just have Hero say it, but in my ideal vision of this, I'd like it to be the Goddess letting Hero know. I mean, that could work. And then we want to do another set flag, which is a back-end operation. And we made a tutorial flag at some point. I want to toggle that on for the room information. And we will set that flag to completed, which should have the UI appear. I feel like I'm clearing from this zone. Okay. Oh, and last thing, we should move those prompts back. Because right now they're still over here. But let's just see if that works. Yeah, the UI appears up here. Does not fill in with any information, which is interesting. Okay. to scene view. Let's drag these back. Well, I guess they could be in the middle. That could be interesting too. We'll just make 3 variations so that it could happen anywhere along this path. It's kind of the beauty of the flag system is once it's been set, it doesn't really matter about the other ones. So we walk forward, we can walk anywhere along here, we'll get a little prompt, hero will speak, and then a piece of UI will appear, and then the idea would be when we reveal the last bit here, which I think I've designed this level in such a way that it's impossible not to reach 100%, we can then have another cutscene happen as the reward for completing this zone. Okay. I think long term I'd also like to have the exposure variable that we use update as we move so that as we're kind of moving through the space, everything's a little bit darker just by a small amount, and there's a slight brightening that happens as you fill this progress bar, and then when it's fully revealed, we do that little pulse to super high brightness and then back down to normal. Okay, regardless, we've spent 36 minutes getting this all set up, 35 minutes, something like that. So now let's move on to balancing. So this HP is way too large for this enemy. We had set it to 750 mostly so we could test comboing really easily. Trying to think, where is that set? I think it's all hard-coded right now. This is another thing we need to do. We need to actually hook up enemy design data and have it so that each enemy has a different ID, and when we spawn that entity by that ID, we give it its appropriate stats. But this should not be 750. So what this value needs to be, we'll start with bringing it down to 100, but this value needs to be something in the range of whatever your basic attack is going to be. When you first start, you're only going to have your punch ability essentially, and we right now have contextual move as that like default attack, and that's too complicated. This one. So we start with contextual move, but contextual move has a bunch of like shove and dash attack built into it, which are like later abilities. So I think I want to simplify this down. So in order to do the balance pass, I think contextual move, this is like it has too much variance to it. I think you should just punch. So this is like going to be a new contextual move. This one will be like complex, and this will be the new basic one. This one shouldn't have any shove effect associated with it, so we can delete all of that. And then I don't think we want it to have the dash aspect here, so this has like a move effect and then a hit effect. Actually, I guess we do want shove. What is this doing? This is trying to see if we found a unit. So we first start by trying to find a unit directly in front of us via 0x1y offset, which is like 1 in front. And then we try and apply a shove effect. Switch up the music again. Not this one. Let's try this one today. So this shove effect is checking to see if we found a unit. I think we might be able to just switch this to a hit effect, which will also be checking to see if we found a unit. And then it's going to show an ability name. How did that work for this one? Custom name shove. Oh, I see here. So we can call this like punch or something. And then we can try deleting the shove effect. And then dash is saying if we didn't find a unit, then we're going to try and move forward if that's a valid tile. I don't think we want this to be a dash effect, though. I think we want this to be a move effect, which is essentially what this is. So we'll go back over here. We're going to not use that dash one. We're going to use this one, which we're stealing from basic move, which we did a few days ago. And this is a move effect. So if the found unit was not found, or if we didn't find a unit, then if this is valid tile, or check if this is a valid tile, and if it is a valid tile, do our site stuff, and then move. Okay, then if we go back into the player container, and this is the old complex one, we can rename it as such for clarity, but I think I will be deleting it here in a second. And then we're going to bring in the new one, and then anywhere where it says complex, here and here, we're going to replace that with the new basic one. And then in theory, I should be able to delete this complex one. I don't think it should be referenced anywhere else except inside of that class. So we can just get rid of that for now. And let's go to the room with the enemy. So we'll go to the tutorial room 3 here. So now we can move normally with that new movement, and then if we walk towards this enemy, we don't auto attack them, but if we do this, we just punch. Okay. And punch is rubbish. We set a default power of 5. And then I assume somewhere inside of here... Were we not changing the default power somewhere? That's for combos. Oh, were we not? I thought dash attack was giving it a default. A new default for that. Maybe we never actually did that setup. We built it so we could, but I guess we never finished hooking that up, which is fine. Okay, so inside of contextual move, we're going to have it have a default power a little higher. I want it shove to be low because shove had some extra kind of effects to it, but let's give punch... well, what was light attack doing? Light attack had a default power of 15. So I guess we'll start with something like 10. We can also take a look at our damage formula sheet as well. So if we bring this over, assuming that we have 10 power, this will do 16 damage. If we have 15 power, it'll do 25. But I don't know what our default attack and defense stats are. So let's go look at the stats of the enemy again. Looks like it has a default physical and magic defense of 10 and 10. What is the default stats of our character? That's going to be inside of unit state now. So we have a default attack of 7 and 7. Okay, so then we know that our attack is 7 and the enemy's defense is 10, and if we give it an ability power of 10, we'll do about 8 damage. About 8 damage. We add a bit of variance to that. Somewhere around 10% on either side. And then this formula tells us if we had a enemy with 100 HP, we'd occasionally do at minimum 14, at maximum 11 hits. 11 hits is way too many hits to kill the first enemy. Unlockable characters with the hydration. Thank you. Oh, actual double thank you. I haven't even filled my water this morning. I will be right back. And we have returned. All right, so what are our goals? I think our goal is that we want to have it so that when an enemy is attacked in the early part, we want to be able to defeat them, but we want it to feel like it's a bit tedious to fight them. We don't want it to feel so tedious that the game feels bad, but we want it to feel like there's room for improvement. And then once we finish our first run, we want to gain a new actual ability, like slash or something along those lines, light attack, heavy attack. There's a bunch of conversations about like the categorization of those that me and Drixie have been having. We could probably talk about that for a little bit. I don't have it documented and I really should have it in here. So in combos, this is for this. Let's make a new wireframe. Nope, that's not the right button for that. How do we make a new one of these? This button? Plus? Ability types. So essentially, we want to be able to break the abilities into a couple of different categories. Ability types. And we want to give those categories something that makes sense. So the goal here is that each different ability, when we do shove, we want to check to see whether or not the ability type of that shove is the next type of ability type that we want to be in our combo. And the idea originally was we were talking about low, high, mid. Maybe we do put it in here actually. So we had this idea of a text input, low, mid, and high. These were like the three categories that we were thinking about for the different types of abilities that we would have. Ability type categories. Nope. Listen, I swear I swear I'm an intelligent human being, but typing just isn't for me. Categories. I blame Google. Makes things too easy. Well, it should. There we go. That's what I'm looking for it to do. Categories. So these are the kind of categories for our abilities. This was what we were originally thinking. But what we found was that like low, middle, high kind of implied that there should be animation differences in those attacks. So if we did an ability that was a low type attack, really the animation of the attack should represent that. And working with Drixie, we realized that that's going to be kind of tricky to find the animations and to create different animations that are going to be of those different categories. And I was using these terms because I had watched a video about like Street Fighter and the history of it, and I thought it was really neat. But like, I hadn't really considered the fact that low, high, mid doesn't make nearly as much sense for an isometric experience. It's a little harder to see when something is a low hit versus a high hit when this is our perspective and our camera angle. So we kind of went back to the drawing board and we tried a couple of different ideas. So we started thinking of like alternate ideas. Alternate new ideas. It's early. Okay, so we come into here. We had a couple of different ideas for this. The first one I thought of was like looking at something I was playing recently, which was Fire Emblem, and there's this idea of like swords, axes, and like bows or lances are more, or like sphere is more common for that game. So that's like another way that you could like categorize them. And I was like, oh, we could do that. We could do different weapons. But I realized that like I don't love limiting the combo ability types to the weapons, because I want the abilities to feel like they're like weapon skills. They're not meant to be the weapons themselves, but the actions your character is doing. So I didn't like that. So when we continued forward and we tried some other ones, in fact, do I have... I don't have it listed in this book. One second. Did we not write it down? I'm positive I remember us writing down the different ideas that we had. Wasn't it in this one? It must be in this one. But where? Doesn't matter that much, but also... Here, this is where we wrote it down. Right, and then we also thought about going back to like light, heavy, and ranged as like categories that we could have for our different abilities. And this feels more like something like Dark Souls, where we could have, oh, you need to do a light hit, and then a heavy hit, and then like a ranged hit. And I think this could probably work, and we may still fall back to this, because what I also realize is this is a very an aesthetic choice. It does impact like our animation sets and kind of like some of the terminology and like the artistic kind of direction, but mechanically really all I care about is the ability of the right ability type, and does it match the ability or the target's like set of ability types it's expecting in order to keep triggering combos. But like what it is doesn't actually matter from a system standpoint. It's very much an aesthetic choice or a cosmetic choice for how the player views their abilities. So light, heavy, ranged could also make sense. And we were thinking about, okay, well, what would light attacks look like versus heavy attacks? And like, we could probably find ways of differentiating them. But then does ranged attacks make sense? Is that Like, do we want to make it so that in order to combo, you have to do a ranged attack? And does that get awkward? Do we start getting into things with like close combat range versus far range? Like, I don't know. It gets a little weird. And it still doesn't necessarily feel the best. We, I think, are getting close to landing on the idea, though, of like, well, we could also do slashing. Bludgeoning. Again, Google save me. And then piercing. And then if you change axe to mace, and spear could still work, you kind of fall into this another set of categories. It's like, oh, well, sword could be light attacks, mace could be heavy, spear could be ranged or piercing. And like, this is just another kind of set of categories. And I think this is where it starts to feel very aesthetic, where it's like, oh, okay, so if we just made it so that we built our stuff around sword, maces, and spears, or it could be even like bows, we realize that all of a sudden, if you think about them as slashing, bludgeoning, and piercing, now you kind of have a bunch of different weapons that could all fit. And then I had the neat idea of like, well, then we could have all of our abilities be like, oh, it's like, you know, long range shot or something. And long range shot could be with you having a bow equipped, or it could even be with like a throwing knife or a throwing axe. And then bludgeoning attacks that are like overhead slam could be with a mace, but it could also be with other type of bludgeoning type weapons like a club. And then maybe the abilities are like the core thing, but you could change the weapons, and the weapons determine the status effect. So if you're using an axe as your slashing weapon, maybe that adds bleeding to the effect, and the weapon determines the status effect, but the ability is just kind of the core raw values. I'm not sold on any of this. This is just kind of where our last brainstorming session ended, but I kind of been leaning more towards slashing, bludgeoning, piercing as like a kind of catch-all category for these that feels like they could work. I think we could also just fall back to light, heavy, ranged, and probably a lot of those weapon categories could still fit with light, heavy effects. But it's really just a way of categorizing our abilities such that we can do combos based off of what type of ability you perform. Yeah, I'm just looking at our notes. Some of the other ideas we had was like javelin, throwing stars for piercing, like basically try and make them all feel like they could be thrown weapons, and then bludgeoning, hammer, flail, club, mace, and then sword, axe, scimitar, halberd, dagger. There's a couple of different options for slashing. We may not go with all of those. We were just brainstorming a bunch of different weapon ideas. The other thought was, this is only 3 abilities, right? They essentially track to essentially 3 categories. These are going to go under... So these 3 categories go to A button, B button, and our Y button. And that leaves a question, well, what does the X button do then? If we have 3 category types and we have an X button, what is that? And I think what I like is the idea that the X button is our wild card. It could be a simple case that the X button is simply just like for status effects, movement, and like any kind of like buffs. Like I want to increase my strength or something. But I think what could also be interesting is if we have the idea that X button is magic, and magic abilities can be any one of the previous types. So it could be a slashing magic ability, it could be a bludgeoning magic ability, or it could be a piercing magic ability. And depending on which of these they are, they all can be equipped to the X button, because normally slashing, bludgeoning, piercing can only be equipped to their respective button, so you can only have one of each of those types. But if magic is a wild card and all magic abilities go into the X button, it's just where magic is equipped, but each magic ability can have a category of one of the other ones. That means you could take 2 slashing on a run if you want, and maybe one of those slashing abilities is more about movement and is low damage, and the other one is more of a heavy hitting one. So you might want to use one slashing to get engaged into an enemy, or even attack and retreat from an enemy, and then follow up with a combo with the heavy one, getting a big multiplier because it has more base ability power. So that's kind of what we're thinking. This all leads into a problem that I have not had. I do not have a solution for, and we're going to kind of be balancing without that solution today, and that's the D-pad. So right now when we move, we kind of have this auto attack. And that auto attack is not going to be any one of these abilities. We've talked about having it be so those abilities actually have, like, that the D-pad could be equipable in the same way that A, B, X and Y, or Y and X are equipable. But I don't love the implications of equipping to the D-pad. It kind of creates some weird scenarios in my mind. So the direction I'm leaning towards is that the D-pad is just like a default ability, which is punch. And it's not related to any of these other systems. It's essentially neutral. That's not how you spell neutral. Okay. So it is a neutral effect or category. Which means that it doesn't really help with the combo stuff. Like, nothing would ever want that, like, neutral effect. But even this doesn't make a ton of sense in my mind, because, like, punch feels like it should be a bludgeoning attack. So I just don't love the way auto attack works right now. There's a couple solutions to that. We just don't give you an auto attack on D-pad. D-pad is only for movement, and we don't do the kind of Pokemon Mystery Dungeon type thing where you can just push the D-pad into the enemy to do a default attack. That might be the easiest approach, but that means that when we start the first run and we go to the Goddess Realm, we should come in here with some sort of weapon. And you start with some sort of ability. And this kind of goes back into our other thing that we need to figure out this afternoon, which maybe we're doing things a little out of order, which is like, what is the unlock order of abilities? When do you get your first ability? How do you unlock that? Because eventually you unlock the skill trees. And once you have one ability, we can unlock all the abilities through the skill tree system. But at some point, the game needs to give you your very first one. This is a neat idea. So, unlockable characters in Twitch chat says, why not refer to them simply as the colors? So, a green ability, a blue ability. I guess technically this would be red, yellow, and blue. Again, it's very aesthetic, so we could theme them in behind the scenes to fit these kind of mental categories that we have as design. So like we make it so they all fit into these, but we could just give them color coding, and probably color coding them with a symbol would probably be a good idea regardless. I like the idea of throwing in color, but I still feel like I want them to have some sort of underlying categorization. I like constraints. As a general rule, I like the idea of constraining myself such that like the options are not limitless, but they can fit into categories that I have to then design around. It just makes things easier in the long run. Because if they're within constraints, I can't do anything and I have to be more inventive. So yeah, we totally could do color, but I kind of want to see if I can make this fit. And it's not limiting us. The only real problem I have with the system at this point, I'm excited by the idea that magic could be one of the three categories, and therefore it kind of serves as like an extra kind of piece of decision making. The real only problem is like the D-pad, and it's like, does the D-pad have its like own set of abilities? Is it like the gray category? And then do I have to make like a whole new set of those that you need to be leveling up, and those are neutral? So the gray D-pad ones are never going to be as strong as A, B, X, and Y because they are related to combos which increase the effect. But gray maybe has some sort of side effect. They do something beyond that. Yeah, so the nice thing about doing colors is, again, the idea that unlockable characters bringing up here is really smart, is that then we can have like purple abilities, which is both red and blue. So you can start to combine them really easily because people just get those ideas. This is really smart. I'm not denying that. I'm gonna think on it. It's a neat idea. It's wicked smart. But it just doesn't feel in line with the narrative I'm trying to create, is the reason I'm fighting it. Okay, so D-pad. So we kind of have to make a choice. Sorry, volume control. We kind of have to make a choice on what we're doing here, because if we're doing like a default punch, that punch will never have a skill tree associated with it. Yeah, what we're trying to solve right now really is the thing I categorized for this afternoon. I think it's all just going to be a mix of stuff. It's not really any one. At this point, we're not really. It's really hard to categorize these into like video titles, because we're just kind of solving the early game experience, which will yield into the rest of the core loop. No, I don't want to have this dialogue. No, skip. Okay. Oh, right, we did a weird hack yesterday and did not... Oh no, we can't see where it is. Okay, I found it. Unlockable characters with the question, standard punch I assume costs less AP and interrupts any combos. I would think so. There's also the variation I thought of where neutral doesn't break combos, so it doesn't affect the combo ordering. So if you have the next thing you want to do is something that costs like 3 action points for like a big hit, but you don't have any more action points left, you could punch twice to fill in the end of your turn. Without breaking your combo, so that you can perform the combo later. Like, there are interesting design things that can come from that. We need to fix this selector. I don't think we've called that out at any point. Small aside. It's kind of already covered by the like revamp the ability like skill tree system we have as a separate task. But I can just put them together. Sure. So if we made Punch your very first skill that you get, we could make it so leveling up Punch makes you a little bit stronger but doesn't innately unlock a new skill. And then as you work your way through Punch, there could be a few branching categories that lead to slashing, bludgeoning, and piercing, and unlock each of those first 3 category abilities, giving you all of those basic ones. But then Punch would need to never be equipable, which is fine because I don't want them to be equipped from here long term. Eventually I want to make a separate screen that when you go to start a run, you can click somewhere to equip your abilities separate from the skill level up screen. And I think that that screen should have like the A, B, X, Y in the corner. And if you hit that button, it brings up a little dialogue with all of the A type abilities that can be equipped, and you choose one and it sockets into that A and that dialogue closes. And so you can kind of choose them that way. And our vision for the skill tree here, I believe, is more like actually making the upper level a skill tree as well, so it represents the interconnectivity. So you see like a single node here, which is Punch at the bottom, and then it would go up into the 3 different abilities, and then you'd be able to select them, but you can't like unlock the next one in the chain. They only become like visible once you've unlocked that ability in the subcategory. And so if that's the case, it's not too bad having Punch in here. Can we give a contextual move ability a ability ID? Can this thing have a design data associated with it? It can have a default design or default display info. When we start a run, let's go to boot screen. I want to load a save file which has all the abilities equipped. I want to look at how we define that design data. I think it's designed as part of... the... creation of it, because now we're building these things. Yeah, there's a design data that's attached to it when it gets built. Which is not here, but in the player state beta. In here... No, it's even before here. We initialize the display info with an ID. So we could hard code the data into it. Oh, but of course we run into the problem where if Punch has to have a skill tree, then it also needs to gain experience. The other option is we make it so that punch or our D-pad just maps to A, B, Y, or X, so that when you bump into an enemy, it just chooses one of these. But that doesn't really make sense for like a range type ability. You couldn't really equip that. We could make it smart, so we could make it so the D-pad figures out what the next best thing you can do is. I know that that's something some of the more modern Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games do. So if you D-pad into an enemy, it'll try and use the best ability for like weaknesses or stuff like that. So in our case, we could try and figure out which, if you've already killed that enemy before and you've learned all of its combos, you could use the D-pad to just bump into them. But it takes most of the like difficulty away from the system. The other option is we give it no attack, that the D-pad is simply just movement. It is the most boring design decision, but it would simplify things greatly. And then if you want to perform an action, you hit A, B, Y, or X. We are already building the game in such a way that it is not like you're going through like a bajillion different menus to select this specific ability. You're only ever going to have 4 abilities equipped at a time, and I want you kind of hitting A, B, X, and Y. I want you hitting those buttons. I don't want you just moving into the enemy with the D-pad with a dumb punch ability. I want you using A, B, X, and Y. So why have anything on the D-pad at all? That's a fair call out, unlockable characters. I think it's likely not set up that way. We can do a quick test though. So we can go to Scene, Forest, TO3, and we can check that if we remove from contextual move, if we disable the hit effect aspect of this, I'm pretty sure it shouldn't do anything in here. Sorry, I'm just fixing something else here real quick, which is that I realized for the Wisp move we were spending time in the Goddess Realm a moment ago. I'm just going to make it so that it doesn't have a cost associated with it. There's a better way to do that, but I'm just going to fix it like that quick. And then in here, if we disable hit, if it finds an enemy, it shouldn't do this move effect, but I think it will still have a cost associated with it. No, because it shouldn't find the move effect. It shouldn't get down in here. And that would mean it's not valid, because it'll never set is valid in here, because it'll never reach this, is my hope. We can give it a shot though. So I believe if we make it just D-pad, if you push towards the enemy, it will try and execute the ability, but it won't actually, or it'll try and predict doing the ability. No, it does. Oh, interesting. I can't use it multiple times, but it does use it once. Oh, but it doesn't suspend it. Oh, it's a UI problem, not an actual problem. So if we were to zoom in really close here, that's not actually spent. That is a red indication, which means that it is trying to preview that move, even though it's invalid. And we can't really see that very well because all our UI is turned off. So that's okay. That's a bug we can fix. And I think that would be relatively straightforward. So it's not using the turn, but it's previewing the invalid move, which we should not do. So what does our tutorial look like if we don't have a default D-pad move? I think that means that we can't attack an enemy with just punch. We need to give them one of these abilities to start with. This is another thing that we talked about recently. Me and Trixie had a brainstorming session about this as well, which is that if we have, can we have an icon that looks like a sword? We can. Can we have an icon that looks like a mace? We can. And if we, can we have a icon that looks like a bow? We can. Perfect. So from these three starting abilities, we can give this one name like slash. This can be bash, and this can be shoot. Let's say that there's something really straightforward. There's the basic three starting abilities that you get. We could just start by giving you slash as the very first ability. Sorry, I'm just curious what this tooltip is saying. Enter? Oh, that's for typing in. And then it's saying control double click. That doesn't do what I think it does. Anyways, so if we have this icon, or if we have this ability slash, we could just give that to you at the start. But I think another way that will make my life more complicated, but could be more fun, is we could actually give you a choice. Choose an ability. And we give you a little UI pop-up that lets you choose your first starting ability. And then what we do is we make it for the skill trees. We make it so all three of these link to each other. So we could have it so slash unlocks shoot, and shoot unlocks slash, slash unlocks bash, and bash unlocks slash, and then bash and shoot unlock each other as well. So no matter which one you choose, you'd be able to unlock the other ones. And then these can then branch out into other abilities, like maybe you can unlock a third one from each of these, but I think this gets kind of weird. I don't know what to name these, so we'll just say level 2. But if we had slash unlock level 2 slash, they just get very circular. If you start with this design, everything from this point onwards gets very like looping, because then you can have like shoot level 2 and like Does level 2 shoot lead to slash level 2? Do they need to lead to each other? And then how does bash level 2 interact with that? And maybe they don't. Maybe they go off in their own directions. We could go something along those lines. So they kind of start in the center and they then branch out into their own sections. That could be interesting too. But then how do we... The question that Drixie asked me on this one was then how do we keep the player from just like going all the way down to like slash level 9 ability and just only getting one type of ability? And it's like, well, we don't. The player can just do that. But if they do, they're going to be missing out on the combos because they won't have the other ability typings in order to actually be able to perform combos which increase their attack slightly. Not by a lot, but it does increase it. So we did some math on it and we found that if you have slash, shoot, and bash, that will always be more effective than just slashing the enemy 3 times. And you could eventually, if we scale the abilities power level essentially as you unlock them, when you get all the way up to like slash level 9, etc., etc., then yeah, slash level 9, if we have like a pretty consistent scaling of power creep, would be better than doing a combo, because this would just be more powerful. But you'd have to spend a lot of the early and mid game just leveling up this tree and not worrying about any of this stuff. But this is another viable way that we could unlock the abilities. The other options we don't let you choose, and I just dictate that like you just get slash. And I just determine that as the designer that slash is the first one you get. It's an interesting idea from unlockable characters. Could have combo unlocks between them. Like you need slash 2 and shoot 2 to reach slash shoot 2 kind of thing. Yeah. So like we could have it that you need to do both of these and then that unlocks... my thought was more around staff. Magic 1. But I was never thinking that you would need to unlock both in order to unlock I was never thinking that you'd need to unlock both. Drixie with the stretch redeem. We will be right back after I move this desk to its standing position. All right. Standing complete. So the reason that I don't really want to have two things require an unlock is it's just muddy from a UI's perspective. When we go to the Goddess Realm, and while we're at it, let's just turn back on the site stuff just because we didn't really successfully build this system. Just so we can see where we're going. I'll take another stab at blocking things later. So when we unlock a new ability, it's by paying its cost inside of a subtree. So having it so that like you have to unlock this ability in 2 different trees in order for the ability to truly be unlocked is something we could do. We could like do something like unlocks fragment 1 of Flame Stab, and then Flame Stab is only going to appear if you then go into a different skill and unlock it from a different route. But I kind of like the idea of just keeping it somewhat simple in that like it's just like, oh, I can go from slash 2 to magic 1, and if I want, I could level up magic 1 and then unlock the node for shoot level 2, and then I could just bypass shoot level 1 entirely if I want to just skip that entirely. I like that direction a little bit more. It reminds me a lot more of something like Final Fantasy X, where it's like, oh, you can kind of make your own journey, your own path. If we were to do the first ability you get is slash, I think we end up with a somewhat similar tree in that slash would probably still want to go to bash and shoot. The difference here, I think, between the let you choose your ability tree and the first ability skill tree is that now we don't necessarily have to have these 2 connect to each other. But we could instead have them both unlock slash level 2. Meanwhile, if we think about bash level 2 up here, let's just move all of this down a bit. How does this work? Like the geometric form of this is quite simple. It like just keeps spiraling outwards in connectivity between them. I like the form of that. That seems interesting. But if we come back down to where we choose the first ability and we guarantee that slash is the first one, I feel like we can do more interesting pathing. So this one, because of its circular nature, I think in some regards will stay circular. It will always kind of branch out if we want to keep some level of interconnectivity. Like maybe at some point when we get to like /3, /3 starts its own line where you don't connect. You don't connect back over here, and then it just creates its own branch on this side with its own magical abilities in its own section up here, and it kind of alternates between like slashing and magic and different slashes, and you're like making choices, and this becomes its own kind of circle and grid up here. But if we start with slash, to be clear, I think that if we choose ability, you have to do this grid. I think if you have your first ability be slash, you could still do this one up here. It could still be that grid. But I think that you also have more options then, because if we're starting with slash, we could do something more custom too. So we could go slash goes into bash and shoot, and you kind of make a choice about which direction you go to start. And then from bash and shoot, then those linearly head up. So it becomes more like a tree structure and less of a circle. So this could go up to bash level 2. And I think there's a ton of different ways you could do this. Actually, just grab this one. But you kind of get this natural structure. Oh, I'm copying these wrong. So if we start with slash, I feel like then we could go to bash and shoot, and then they could go level up to their like level 2 forms, and it kind of creates more of this like triangle form. Whereas if we let you choose your ability, if we do our first ability as slash, you can do this triangle form, or you could still do something somewhat circular, but this would essentially be your starting point, and you'd be more likely to go for slash 2, I think, opposed to getting the first 2 abilities. But if we go with choose ability, I think we kind of have to do a structure like this. If we were to let you choose bash, then you could go to bash 2 or slash 2, and then why would I go to slash 2, or why would I go to slash 1 over level 2? Like, why would I go to that direction? This feels like a big decision point. Hydrate redemption from unlockable characters. Thank you. Potentially. Unlockable character says first 3 skill points can only unlock slash, shoot, bash, and after that the skill points can unlock whatever. Like how some games have different skill learning costs and different tier costs. So something I haven't talked about, but another debate that me and Trixie have been having, not debate, but like another brainstorming session, is like this idea that maybe these skill trees need something other than just level up cost. So if we look at something like Final Fantasy X, Final Fantasy X has like its level nodes that you need to unlock level 2 in order to be able to gain access to that node. So we could still have something like, hey, in order to get to bash 2 from here, or even slash 2, you need to unlock a like unlock stone or tier stone, and you have to make a choice to use that tier stone item in the skill tree in tandem with your experience on that ability. And so when you first start, your only options are to go to these, because you just don't get a tier stone early enough in the game experience, and you have to get far enough in the game in order to unlock one of those items. So you're kind of guided a little bit by like these kind of secondary items that you need to gain access to. They're really currencies, but they can be treated as an item cosmetically to the player. Like a lot of Final Fantasy X skill tree system has essentially a series of different currencies all associated with them. And to be clear, this thing we're drawing is not the actual skill trees. These are going to be the skill trees with like gaining, unlocking certain smaller stats and potentially even like improvements to that ability. So that ability gets stronger by upgrading some of the nodes inside of it. Like even I've had ideas that maybe certain abilities could gain status effects. So if you do like you have bash, maybe there's like a node in here that has a chance of causing confusion when you use that ability, but that's not a base effect of it. It's a upgrade that you unlock in its skill tree to give it that potential confusion effect. Or stun effect maybe would make even more sense. So like we're not even designing the skill trees here, we're designing the unlock order of the abilities, and the abilities have their own skill trees inside of them. So when I say that it would need a tier stone, what I'm actually saying is that this would have its own structure for bash, where like, for example, there's say we removed this node in the center and this was unlocking that bash, there might be a tier stone here that prevents you from unlocking, like, I guess it would be bash level 2. So this would be the bash skill. If we didn't have this node looping around and we had a tier node here that requires you to spend an item that you get from the game experience, like maybe from completing certain quests or events in the game, that would unlock a stone which lets you gain access to bash level 2. So we could gate your progression inside of even this center circle could be gated in the same way too. And we could do the same thing here, where this is like a level 3 tier stone that blocks you from being able to go into this section. So then it's like these rings that you can go around once you go up a level. Like we could make it so you don't need to use a level 1 tier stone to go between, say, if you wanted to go to bash, you could go all the way through magic 3 in order to gain access to it. And even though I'm trying to visualize this in this way, because this isn't going to, well, we might want to show it to the player, but we could also just show it as a list of abilities you've unlocked, and we don't have to show the interlinking between them. Would allow us to go like magic 3 to shoot 2 if we wanted. It's only if we decide to show the player this visually on a screen that we kind of have to maintain some level of visibility or readability. I'm leaning towards this. Yeah. This is more work, which somehow I always choose the option that's more work, but I think this yields a more interesting play experience, because when I play the game, I might choose to start with shoot, so I have the ranged ability, and that makes it harder for me to explore, but I feel like I'm more safe, and I'm more able to maybe more easily outmaneuver the enemies. Actually, I'm talking it aloud, and I'm realizing that shoot's a really bad starting skill. We could just do, you choose between the two melee abilities. That's like a third option here that I hadn't really considered, but I think ends up being similar. The problem is if Bash requires multiple skill points, which is what it currently does, it requires 2 skill points, starting with... Okay, yeah, there's problems. Okay. Currently, Slash is a 1 AP low damage ability. And Bash is a 2 AP, let's say mid damage ability, because it's not even high, it's just like... And then I've been thinking that Shoot is also a 1 AP low damage, but has a different kind of cost associated with it because you need to be at the right range. So if we let you choose any of these abilities, if you choose Slash, you're going to be the least safe. Because you're going to be always in range of the enemy and doing low chip damage. If you choose Shoot, then you're going to have to keep moving away from the enemy to get the right range to be able to shoot them, so you're going to waste a fair amount of your AP. So we could consider this maybe a mid damage ability because it requires a move AP in order to get into the right range consistently. And then Bash requires 2 AP, which means if you have 3 AP to start, you can't do anything with that extra 1 AP, and you're going to be skipping your turn a lot. So there's no reason you couldn't pick between the 3 of them. But it's going to be a bit awkward. Whereas if we start you with Slash, we have a more controlled player experience, and they may not get themselves into a bad feeling experience with the game. The other option is we just make all 3 of these generically similar, so that all of them are just like, hey, Bash is also just a 1 AP low damage ability, and Shoot is also a 1 AP low damage ability with a maybe an extra bit of range, but is still usable in melee with the first version. And it's not until you get to like the level 2 variations that they start to get a little bit more complicated. Yeah. These versions that I was thinking in my head don't have to be the versions we go with. I think if we go with the choose option, which I am leaning towards, I think we make them generically similar. And it's not until you level up a few times that you get to choose between them. And the real value in unlocking the next one isn't that it has some unique gameplay as much as it is that it gains you the ability to access combos. Last thing we have to think about here is the combos themselves. So if the first enemy we run into we run into is a slime, right? And that slime has a combo track. Right now, I think what we've done is slash bash is the combo. It's like low, low, mid or something. But if we have this combo set, then unlocking, choosing shoot or choosing bash, and then unlocking slash say third. If you were to go here on the shoot, go down, unlock bash, and then unlock slash last, then you may not get access to the combos till pretty late in the experience. And I'd like to tutorialize combos. So the pros to choose an ability is variation in starting game experience. Need to simplify. This is a con. Need to simplify starting abilities so that there is not a noticeable worst or best version. They would need to be pretty much consistently similar. Combos get harder to tutorialize. The option for this is we make it so the slime has no combos versus it to start, so that there's no effective advantage. And it's not until a little bit later into the demo slash full game that you start interacting with enemies that actually have combos that work against them. They're inverses of each other, right? Starting abilities can be more varied. Complex. Alright, so really the only major pro here that I'm really latching onto and I like the idea of is that the starting game experience is more varied. If we just give you slash to start with, then we get a much more consistent play experience. And if we really want to fix the combo path, the other option is that the goddess actually gives you all three abilities. So instead of giving... There's another way that we could build the skill trees. Where the goddess actually gives you slash, and that leads to like slash level 2 and see here, let's build this out. I want to think about this as another option. We could go to slash level 2, we can go to magic 1, we can go from shoot to shoot level 2, And then bash could go to bash level 2. And we could have it so that you gain each ability in order, so that we guarantee that you're going to get access to the combo at a fixed point during the demo. I guess technically we wouldn't even necessarily have to do it this way either. We wouldn't even need to have a direct connection between these. Kind of hate this version the most. So this gives us the most control over going down to this version of the skill tree for unlock order. Gives us the most control where the goddess hands out each of these 3 abilities in succession based off your progression through the demo. And then we can really give combos a like, oh, we know that bash doesn't come until the 3rd ability, so we could have the first combo starter be bash. And then we know that the player won't be able to even initiate a combo until they get this 3rd ability. If we go with the first ability is given as slash, and we force the first ability, but we let you find the other 2 abilities via the skill tree system, then we run into the player potentially not unlocking bash right away, and instead unlocking shoot, and then not getting bash until later. Or we go with the let them choose the abilities, and then they might choose bash right off the bat, and then they get to immediately start doing combos. They won't be able to do the slash part if this was it, but they could do bash and get a bit of extra damage, bash, do normal damage, bash, get a little bit of extra damage. So they're like initiating a combo, breaking a combo, initiating a combo, breaking a combo. And then a really, like, if you're replaying the game, you could be like, oh, I'm going to unlock bash first because it gives me a little bit edge on damage, and then I'll do slash second so that I can just do the full combo. In fact, maybe in order to make it so you don't completely break the game, maybe it's like the first combo is like bash slash shoot, so that it requires all 3 of them in order to get a full combo set, denying your enemy an action for the turn. And then there's a right way to unlock the skills. But a player who doesn't unlock it the right way doesn't unlock the combos right away. But maybe that's fine. Like, maybe if a player doesn't unlock combos right away, is that a big deal? That's maybe the question I should be asking myself. We got to take a break for lunch. We got to take a break for lunch. We will be back in an hour. I'm going to give some more thought on this. I think the big last question here is, does it matter if players unlock combos at different times? That's the big question. It means that we'll have less of a consistent understanding of how the players will play through the experience. We could also make it so that if we let you choose these abilities, we could have the additional abilities you unlock fairly early in all 3 trees. So that it's a pretty nominal cost. So if this was like, okay, here's the skill tree, you start here, and then like you unlock maybe one stat node, and then you get a choice between a stat node and a new ability. And it's like, oh, I'll get the new ability. And it's like, I mean, we could even have it so that if you choose slash, the next thing you unlock after slash is required to be the next ability before you even get into any stats. So I guess that's an aspect we hadn't really considered too much. It still means the players would unlock combos at different rates and different times, but if we force that these unlock paths are very early in those ability skill trees, then we can at least ensure that they get all 3 of them relatively quickly, giving them access to progression. There would still be some amount of variance of different timings of when combos get unlocked. But we can expect that most players should unlock them all within a few runs. Okay. Okay. I think I'm on board for that being an okay, like if we give them the abilities quick enough in the trees, I think the combos being at different rates would be fine. The next problem is, are we okay with abilities being simple to start? And that's really because we can't have bash require 2 action points if we don't have something to fill in the gap for that 3rd action points. I really don't want a player to have to bash for 2 action points, have 3 action points, and then just like skip their turn. I guess the solution to that is start with 2 AP. There's solutions. All right, I gotta go make lunch. I will be back in an hour or so. I guess 58 minutes at this point. For now, though, this is gonna be Tolhi signing out.